So welcome and glad to have everybody joining us today. Our guest today is Amit Choudhary, who is the Chief Operating Officer and Executive Vice President of Global Financial Services, the SBU at Capgemini. And of course, he's joining me with my colleague and esteemed colleague, I will say, Professor Raghu Iyengar, who is also, as am I, a professor here at the Wharton School. He's also the director of Wharton Customer Analytics. So let's begin, Amit. And I want to start with just asking you to introduce yourself and in terms of what your background is and how long you've been in your current position.
Perfect. Hello, Dave, and hi, Raghu. Thank you for having me here. As Dave mentioned, I am currently the Chief Operating Officer for the Global Financial Services SBU at Capgemini. I started my career as an engineer in the high-tech industry almost 2.5 decades ago. After my MBA, I moved into management consulting, where I worked with the CEOs and boards on emerging market opportunities and challenges. Worked across different sectors like healthcare, pharma, steel, and financial services. After a few years, I moved back to technology with the Capgemini Group, where I first worked as an account executive owning a P&L, then moved into finance, where I played the role of the Chief Financial Officer for the FSSBU. And then almost just in time, last year, February, I moved into my role of the COO for the same FS unit.
So I'm really curious. It's nice to see someone who's been in different seats. I'm curious. How do you find being the COO versus the CFO, and which do you prefer?
That's a tough question, but I think it was all building upon the other. In fact, my account executive role helped me play the CFO role because I could understand the operations and then I could then understand the implication it has on the financials. And once I understood the financials and how the end-to-end numbers make sense and does not, in my COO role, combining the account exec and the finances, making it much more effective and much more pragmatic as opposed to a PowerPoint-oriented thinking process.
So it's our desire to talk about the impact on businesses during the pandemic. So if you could give us a little bit of a sense of how the pandemic has affected Capgemini.
If it affected us like most of the industry and the people in multiple ways. I would categorize the impact on us in two different categories. So first, I would say we reacted in terms of protection and safety. Safety of our people, protection of our people was paramount.
Yeah.
And very quickly after that, protection and safety of the urgent client systems that we were managing and maintaining. Because our clients, especially for us, which are banks and insurance companies, they were impacting and they were being needed by the public at large in terms of the services that they could render. So that was the first part of quickly reacting to the protection for our direct people as well as people that our clients were servicing. And then very quickly, we moved to work with our clients who were at a different ends of the spectrum and along the spectrum of their readiness to deal with something like this. So obviously, there were some clients who had already invested in a lot of technology, were already agile, and we worked with them to see how we can fine tune the response to what their clients were expecting in the market. And then there were some other clients who had not made that journey yet, but they wanted to cover that space much faster than maybe some of their other peers would do. And with our domain knowledge and industry experience, we worked with them to firstly prioritize, because the main thing about achieving something big in a short time frame is to select a few things that will have the maximum impact. So working with the clients to see, okay, if you have 3 months, if you have 6 months, how do you prioritize and what do you work on? So these were the two different areas, protection and quick response. And on the side of quick response, the fact that we have what we call domain down to the keyboard helped us work with the clients not only on the whiteboard, but on the keyboard in terms of how to translate those decisions into realities and so that their clients can
Mm.
see the impact of their quick responsiveness to deal with the emergencies.
Sure.
No, I think this is a great, thank you for leading us off, Amit, with that answer in the sense that clearly clients are different, their needs might be different. And so what you need to do for one set of clients is quite different from another set. In terms of just kind of the operations side of things, which you were responsible for, how did that translate to it? Did you have different teams working on different things? How would you remaining agile in your organization as you are making other people agile?
So once again, very fair question, and you're right. If we are ourselves not agile, we cannot help our clients be agile. So clearly, we had invested in our people and culture as well as our technology itself. At the same time, our understanding of how the overall global delivery model works. The one of the advantages that we were able to leverage was people could work from anywhere on any project at any time. And therefore, we suddenly had access to 270,000 people at Capgemini
Yep.
who could work, and we could get the best talent depending on the time of the day. In fact, sometimes it didn't matter to work on a typical project and a problem. So clearly, our virtual collaboration tools, the platforms that we had set up for ourselves, and our distributed agile delivery model helped us react to some of these client questions and client challenges in a very prompt manner. And in fact, we were able to pull out, as I said, talent from Asia Pacific to work on a project on US, or talent from France to work on a project in Asia Pacific, because these were the special capabilities that we could access without people having to move or travel to these locations.
So Amit, I'm really curious. I would suspect that historically a large part of the job was traveling and being on site with the client. And there's been a total transformation of that. How has that transition gone? And how well does that work with your clients? Is it working just as well as it was before, or perhaps even better?
So clearly, it's difficult to give one generic answer. So there are pockets clearly where you do need to interact with the clients and get that personal rapport and the bond developed. But the good thing was a lot of our clients are repeat clients. So in some cases, we already had those relationships. And therefore, what we were able to do was to leverage our relationships that we had already had, our domain understanding of what the clients might need in an insurance industry, in the PNC part of the insurance industry, or in retail banking or wealth. We were able to tap into these knowledge pockets to respond quickly. In fact, I use the word distributed agile. In the last decade or so, you would have heard a lot of talk about agile being the new way of delivering. And we were working and our talent pool, as you know, is distributed across the globe. So we had been working on how to deliver in the same agile way in a distributed fashion. And this was, in some ways, our preparing for the future. We did not know it will get used in a pandemic context, but having worked on that and being prepared for that helped us very quickly adapt to the new ways of working in a distributed agile fashion. And we feel that distributed agile is now going to stick around for future, as opposed to going back to one local agile.
No, great point, Amit. And I think something that Dave and I, over the interviews you've done, we've consistently seen the following kind. And this is a two-part question, already putting it in. The first part is that, what we've seen consistently is that there were lots of innovations, perhaps strategies that companies were going to do. But perhaps it may have come later. The pandemic accelerated it. So it looks like the distributed agile perhaps fits into one of those. Were there other things that perhaps you were trying and kind of saying, look, we'll explore it more so in the next year, but guess what? March of 2020 was a big game changer, and perhaps you started exploring it before. And the other one is, which I think relatedly, something that you mentioned, which is obviously Capgemini already is very international. And when you think about the way the pandemic rolled out, it rolled out in Asia, came over here, were there already some learnings that you had in the company from the first few months, which better prepared you perhaps for other parts of the world in terms of what to do?
Sure, and clearly two very interesting and different questions. So I'll start with the latter one. In terms of, so when you look at pandemics or any crisis, it's hard to tell where it is going to come from and in what form. But the one thing that we have seen over the years, one crisis after another, is ultimately your people are able to take you through the crisis. And then the technology platform that you have, is it agile enough to allow these people with good intentions to execute on what the intentions are?
Yeah.
So clearly, while we did not know what this next crisis can be, it could have been a pandemic, it could have been an industry crisis, a very focused challenge to look at. We had been investing in our people. In fact, we had a slogan that we went with, people matter, results count. And clearly, people matter was an important part. We had a culture that we invested in, and all of it aligned to the purpose of the organization, because that is what keeps all the 270,000 people aligned towards one goal. Although we do encourage an entrepreneurship way of thinking, at the same time, we talk about aligned entrepreneurship so that we can all be aligned across globes, across different cultures. Now, yes, having been in all the countries in different parts and starting to see something happen in APAC, where we started getting a feel for that something like this might happen. Must say, we had no clue it will become so big. It is hard to predict.
Right.
But at the same time, we started thinking about some scenarios, and in our India delivery center being the largest delivery center in different cities, we started thinking about some scenarios that if this happens, how do you react to it? So we started working on, even before the pandemic hit India, on how to get people to work from home, because most of our model was to work from the office, work from the client center. And so it gave us not a lot, but a few weeks of advanced thinking time when we started reacting to this. But once again, we were not prepared for this massive scale of disruption at that point in time. And on your first question about where the spending has increased and where it has decreased, clearly we saw a big decrease in our travel expenditure.
Correct.
There were quite a few events that we had planned that we did not go through because we wanted to, once again, put safety of our people and our clients up front. And we use that saving in some ways to channelize it towards our people's safety. As I said, we worked on work from home context and what do we need in terms of enablement, collaboration tools to make it much more effective for our people to work from home. We also invested in our technology further in terms of what can be coming and what do we need to get prepared for. We invested a lot around security because security is very important for our clients,
of course,
with banks and insurance industry. So all of this investment was channelized. We also increased our investment on content. So we did a lot of podcasts, ebooks, social selling. So clearly it was more of a portfolio management of what the savings are coming in, how can we invest it in something that can give us a long-term return.
Great, thank you.
So, let me just follow up with that, Amit. And I'm thinking about a lot of the events that you would have gone to would be to, continue to promote Capgemini and to, basically invest in your brand. And I think a lot about brands and the difficulty of maintaining a brand when you are a service and rather than a standardized product, because part of the importance of a brand is to have some standardization. So I'm curious about what it is that you do to create operationally what you do to create that standardization. And when somebody hires Capgemini, how do they know what it is that they're getting? And sort of how do you get that uniformity when you don't even have the opportunity to get physically together and meet and do any of that training?
A very valid question, and parts of this question is valid even outside of the current context. And so Very early in my career, one of my managers said, we are as good in front of a client as our last delivery. So our biggest brand promise comes from how well are we able to deliver on the projects that we have already sold to the clients or worked with the clients. And given, as I said, also a lot of our business is repeat business.
Yeah.
Therefore, when we look at branding, it depends upon, it's a lot of it is about working with our existing clients and some of our potential clients. And also branding for us, and while clients is one dimension of branding that is important, there's a talent dimension of branding. We
Right.
are in the people sector, 270,000 people. People need to feel proud to work for Capgemini. And therefore, if I look at it on the client side, just to give you an example, client visits used to be one of the most important factors which gave our clients or potential clients comfort how our global model works. How are people sitting in India could be working on a project in US or Paris? And what one of the ways for us to overcome that used to be by working with the clients to see if some of them could be visiting our global delivery centers and seeing us in action. Now, that part obviously was impacted by the pandemic. We could not get our clients to visit our global delivery centers. But at the same time, our team came up with some innovation around how can we create virtual client trips, virtual client events. So
Interesting.
in some ways, we created an airport, we created a flight, and that's where we said, let's take this client to the virtual experience, and at the same time show him or her how our global model has now adapted to the new virtual way of delivering. So that was some innovations on the client side.
Yep.
If I look at on the talent side, we had already moved to mostly digital platforms in terms of talent attraction.
Mhm.
So in that sense, we did not get much impacted by the pandemic and not being able to meet virtually or physically to react to that. Now, we did have to adapt some of our recruitment processes, which were also dependent upon physical meeting before you do the final step of the offer. And our teams came up with different, you did do different experiments. None of us knows real answer which one will work or not. You do some experiments, you see which one is working, and then you iterate on it. So that's how we adapted our branding both in front of our clients, giving them the positive experience, making sure that the delivery goes right, and therefore ensuring that they come back for our future projects and future work, as well as making sure that our talent stays connected with us. And in the one thing that was different with the talent this time was not necessarily the external talent, but our ability to engage and interact with our existing talent
Mhm.
who are now working from home. We could not do floor walks, meeting over a coffee outside the office. So we had to create some situations, some virtual collaboration setups to be able to engage and still
Right.
interact with our talent.
No, I think great point. I mean, I think keeping the team morale, so to speak, kind of making sure that even if you're engaged in a project which has been with a previous client, how do we kind of make sure that everybody still comes together? I think is a huge part.
Yeah,
So building on this point that you made earlier, Amit, which is, obviously global company, lots of different things happening in different regions. As you look forward now, and I'm hoping the next few months, positive recovery and all of that stuff going on, do you see things, how do you see things shaping up? Will it be going back to normal? Will it be different by region, you think? Would some things be more sticky than others, so to speak? Any thoughts operationally how things might be similar or different?
sure. And a lot of us are actually thinking about it as we go.
Yeah.
So while we know some silhouettes of what the new normal might look like, I do not believe we still know what it will
Yeah.
be in details. So we are also staying abreast in terms of what the developments are happening, how our clients are planning to react to the new normal. So we are coming up with a few scenarios, hypotheses of what the new normal might look like and starting to get ready for it. But clearly, there will be a few things that will stick with us even after the new normal stabilizes. To give you an idea, the travel will sure not go back to the pre-pandemic levels. It will be higher than what we had seen last year, but it will naturally reduce. People have learned that they could achieve a lot of stuff without traveling, and that gave them a good balance in terms of what they could achieve productivity in the day, as well as what they could do outside. So clearly, the travel is not going to go back to the original levels. We will see a significant increase in virtual events, virtual collaboration. We had quite a few virtual events where we realized that our ability to get our global leaders to be present and share their experiences in a virtual setting was much higher, because we could not get some of these leaders in all the physical events that we used to have in the past. So we will see an increase in the number of virtual events. We will clearly see a shift on work from home. A bigger percentage of people will work from home than they were used to in the past. And and to my satisfaction, one of the things that will stick around will be the CSR topic for the organizations. CSR in many organizations in the past used to be on the periphery. We have seen a clear shift of CSR becoming the center of the purpose of many organizations. And that gives me a good level of confidence that, unlike the previous crisis, this crisis might have a greener recovery than the previous crisis might have had.
So this is great. It sounds like there's a fair amount of learning that Capgemini is doing from what it is, that they're experiencing during this pandemic. And I think that's great. I feel compelled, since Raghu asked a two-part question, I'm going to ask one as well. And it's sort of born by some of what you've written, and I've read some of your writings. And that is you've talked about the use of data and how it's important for your customers to be using, your clients to be using their data, and how you help them with that. So I want you to talk about if that has shifted, since so much of daily operations of business have turned more digital, how that has shifted. And the second part of the question is related to the shoemaker's daughter wearing shoes. Does Capgemini use its data to better understand its clients? So two-part, probably long question.
No, absolutely. And we do believe very firmly as an organization that cloud and data will be two of the game changers of the midterm near future. And data has a lot of sensitivity built around it. Once again, it has to be permissible data. That is the first step, and we feel very strongly about it, that data should be used only after permission for a specific reason, for a specific purpose. Right. But having done those hygiene factors and living in the boundaries that are defined by ethics, clearly a lot of value that data can provide us. And once again, data has evolved over a period of time. Yesterday, if I could see data and make sense of it by myself, today, if I tell you that I can see data and make sense by myself, I'll be lying. The amount of data that is out there, the granularity of data that is there, and in fact, sometimes we are also, I know there is a value in, say, hypothesis-driven approach to solving a problem. Sometimes we also have to be aware that our hypothesis might be built on our biases. Right. And so we might a lot of times miss the real solution just because my experience tells me to test for this hypothesis and not that one. So clearly, once you start collecting a lot of data, and cleanliness of data is one of the key factors that differentiates. Obviously, we have heard even before this pandemic, garbage in, garbage out. But once you have clean data, once you have permissible data, then you can really, sometimes it's useful to let the machine learning algorithm run on it and tell you blindly what is really the factor that is impacting it, instead of you telling and testing a hypothesis. So clearly we see an intuition-based decision-making then being tested by data. At the same time, leveraging data to a lot of discussion is also happening about our conscious and subconscious bias. And obviously there are schools of thought that says, give me a statement and I'll find data to prove that statement. As long as we are careful, how do we use this data?
Sure.
Clearly, a lot of value to be drawn from that, because it is humanly impossible to start drawing trends from the size of data that exists today.
So Amit, as we're coming to the close of half hour, I think you had mentioned before, obviously, Capgemini was, at least reasonably well prepared in terms of thinking about not the scale of the pandemic, but already kind of thinking about what might happen. And given your experience at Capgemini and many other places, the 2008 recession, and in fact, what we've seen is there have been many recessions. And so how do you think that this particular one and what we're seeing today was fundamentally different? Was it different? Was it similar? Were the 2008 recession, of course, that was a financial driven one. What do you think were differences, so to speak, or similarities?
So once again, the biggest difference about this pandemic from all the previous crises has been when you have a strategy in place which says, if something goes wrong in this city,
Yep.
we have backup plans in other cities to take care of the crisis. Here, almost the whole world got impacted around the same time.
Right.
And nobody was prepared to deal with it at that scale across geographies. So clearly, it does tell us that. So that was the nature of difference of this crisis than all the others that we have seen in the past. Once again, I will be naive if I say that I knew exactly, or we knew exactly how to deal with it, and we did not. We knew exactly how to go take one path after another. But what was similar was in each of the crises before, as I said earlier, our people have helped us manage and overcome this crisis. And they stepped up again this time to understand, firstly, the safety of their colleagues, and at the same time, understanding the critical client services that we were supporting and figuring out how to prioritize. Prioritization was the key. The good thing was still with work from home and different countries having different setups of how soon we could move to work from home. We were able to leverage and shift some of the work to be able to deliver to our client requirements. And once again, I said, this was not what we were preparing for, but our global delivery model in some ways was a benefit for us, because we were already used to working in a standardized way, a structured way of delivering to client requirements in different parts of the globe.
Amit, very, very, very interesting and great insights. Appreciate you sharing them with us and with everybody else who gets a chance to see this. Thank you for your leadership and for joining us today, and good luck for tomorrow. So thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you for the opportunity. Thanks, Raghu.
Thank you. Thank you, Amit.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.